peace. And I want to say peace and hello. Guess what? Today we have a special guest. This is Reverend Diane Smith. She's going to share her title with you.
I am a Master of Divinity from Claremont Seminary in Southern California and a board-certified chaplain by the Association of Professional Chaplains.
Good afternoon and welcome. And we're welcoming you, Miss Reverend Diane Smith.
Thank you.
She's the Director of Ministry Engagement, Chief Diversity Officer. I found the Reverend at a conference. Okay, so let me just give you a little snippet of background before we get into why this is so important and very important for you to get. If you need any information, just check the credits and her name and everything will show up, and you can call and you'll be able to scan after the show services if you need it. I found it interesting that I was at a conference and we were doing breakout rooms. And I've always been interested in healing. And I decided to venture off on that journey for myself. I had suffered losses and had passed myself and been brought back to life. So in that, I just felt like I wasn't mourning and I wasn't grieving and I wasn't putting this in a proper place or somewhere where I could in a healthy way go forward without always kind of venturing back to it. All of us at some point, I'm pretty sure, have lost a loved one or another, and maybe somebody has told you, oh, you ain't over that yet, and that's just kind of disturbing to me. So at this conference breakout room, I saw Reverend Diane Smith, and she does what's called, I don't know if you can see this, camera 2 over there, grieving support service, which will offer information at the end, like I said. And it goes into workshops for adults and kids. Actually, you can just call it a family thing, a family affair, if you will. Their Healing Hearts Book Club, Together in Grief sessions, Walk Together, Creative Connections for Kids, virtual groups, grieving parents, left behind survivors, loss from suicide or overdose, loss of a spouse or a partner, navigating grief, and hybrid groups for the young, the grieving. Kid counseling and adult counseling services are available and phone numbers for that. But what I really loved is that there are group guidelines. So if you are to encounter things in other areas where they tell you, oh, get over it, don't. Well, this, I think, is a wonderful thing. I'm not going to read the entire thing out because I want Miss Diane to talk about this. And then there's a mourner's Bill of Rights, which tells you you have the right to mourn. And there's no specific way someone should be telling you other than a professional like Miss Diane on how you can reach her, and that you get a good grieving booklet as well that gives you some points and stories and what to expect while you're going through the process. So now, she can tell you more about it, but first, we want her to tell us what we can do, Miss Diane, to get a hold of you and what it is that specifically you and your team offer when someone is seeking help
With grief.
with grief.
Well, first I'll tell my story. I know earlier you were telling your story. My story is a little different, but it was traumatic as well. I was engaged to be married. Was supposed to marry in 1980. Got engaged when I was maybe 19 or 20 years old. My fiance was killed in an accident. I had graduated from college. I was in graduate school. He had not graduated yet. And that changed my whole life, my whole trajectory. What I thought I wanted to do, I did finish graduate school, but after the accident, I don't remember anything the teachers taught me in grad school.
Okay.
Nothing.
Okay.
I don't know how they let me out,
Okay.
but I did graduate.
Uh-huh.
And I started working, and that first graduate degree was in speech pathology.
Okay.
So I worked for a public school system.
Mhm.
And something that happened early on when I was a child, maybe 8 years old, after I was baptized actually in Jackson, Mississippi, I felt that working for the church must be the most wonderful thing in the world.
Okay.
But of course, after that, I got older, fell in love, had a high school sweetheart, went
Okay.
off to college, had another sweetheart whom I was going to marry. So that went out the window, and I did the speech pathology piece.
Okay.
After he died, I finished graduate school. I went to work in a small town like that
Okay.
in Mississippi to be the speech therapist for the county school system.
Okay.
And while I was there, I was reacquainted with a woman I'd known for many years, who for my denomination was a goodwill ambassador all over the world.
Oh, okay.
And I talked to her about her life and her work. And after I started talking to her and hearing about her experiences, a light went off. And that's how things come to me. That's how the light goes off.
Okay.
And I said, wow, this is something I should be doing.
Mhm.
So I started contacting different denominations saying that I wanted to do mission work.
Oh, okay.
And I contacted the Church of the Brethren. I contacted the United Church of Christ, I think. I contacted my own denomination, which was the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. And here you have the United Church of Christ up in the north.
Okay.
Down south, there are more disciples churches.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's good.
And they're all congregational.
Okay.
So I heard from my own denomination. I didn't tell them where I wanted to go. I didn't tell them what I wanted to do. They sent me to Japan.
Ah.
And I taught at a junior college for Japanese women.
Okay.
One day, during an English chapel, which was what we were required to do, we had to do one English chapel a week, and we took turns, the English-speaking staff.
Okay.
And on this particular day, I was telling them my story
Okay.
about losing my boyfriend, right?
Right. Mhm.
Which was way back there, 4 years earlier.
Mhm.
And as I'm telling the story, near the end, I started saying, and I am so happy, and the tears came. And that was my first experience of grief and shock
Mhm.
and surprise.
Mhm.
So what I would say about grief more than anything else is it is out of your control. The process is out of your control. When if you think you're pushing it down and everything is all right and you're okay, if you don't tend to it, it comes to get you.
Mhm.
So in the middle of all that joy, and I am so happy, I could not stop crying. The whole auditorium was in tears before it was over.
Okay.
And that's when I knew that I had not done my work.
Okay.
I knew it in the moment, but I didn't start doing the work even then. But that's when I got in touch with the fact that there's something here, because that caught me totally off guard.
Mhm.
And I thought I was 4 years out from the death and I was fine.
Okay.
So if I don't say anything else, that's what I want to say, that it's out of your control, and if you don't tend to it, it comes up, it bubbles up,
Mhm.
and it comes out one way or the other.
Mhm.
So, the gift of that time was that it gave me time. I did the work that I did, and it prepared me for what came next, the understanding that ministry was my life.
Okay.
And I came back to America after 4.5 years to go to seminary. And that's where I got the MDiv at Claremont School of Theology in
Okay.
Claremont, California.
Mhm.
And while I was there, I eventually worked with women in prison, doing an internship in Boston, outside of Boston, at Framingham Women's Prison.
Mhm.
And I came back and worked with homeless women and children at a shelter in Pasadena, California. And all of these women had experienced some kind of loss. All of them. Either as young children or as they had become adults, there was a loss of safety, a loss of security, there was a loss of stability, and that impacted who they became and what they did with their lives. In fact, about 97% of the women who came through the shelter had been assaulted as children. The ones who ended up in the shelter didn't have a safety net. The ones who didn't end up in the shelter, and millions of women don't end up there, and children as well, they had some kind of safety net.
Yeah.
And so this loss of security, this loss of safety was also something that they were not grieving.
Okay.
They were not grieving. The trauma had them caught up, and they couldn't work it out to make decisions that made them safe, that gave them security. So, again, as I said before, if you don't tend to it, it comes out. And so they ended up homeless. They ended up homeless, and their children ended up homeless and were brought into homelessness. And if that, something that we do in the community here, is the realization that with the community violence intervention team, if you don't take care of people when they're young, if you don't address what's going on around them, if they don't have the opportunity to address grief and loss and violence and whatever impedes their positive growth, then it comes back to get them.
You know, I want to just interject one quick thing. I don't want you to lose your thought. But a school teacher once told me that if you don't catch them at 5 and 6 years old, you lose them.
You can. And that's real. And if you don't ever catch them, they're gone. So when it comes to grief, violence, trauma, if you don't tend to it, it comes to get you. The other thing that I want to say about grief and loss and the trauma that you experience behind it is, do not imagine it doesn't constantly impact your life. I'm married to someone who lost his mother when he was 7, lost his father when he was 10. He got his PhD at the University of Michigan. While he was doing that, he met with other grad students, and there was a program to support people going through the program, through the process. And he learned, just out of the blue, he learned that people who have lost one parent have delayed completion of degrees. He lost both parents. One, and then 3 years later another. It took him 13 years. That was not because he wasn't capable. That was, I believe, in fact, the trauma that impacted his process. And I know then for a fact that that's real, because we experienced that. And I was so grateful to have that information, to know that that statistic existed. So it normalized the process that he was going through. It normalized the process we were going through. And that's significant. That's the other piece of grief. When you can normalize the process.
Normalizing trauma.
Not the trauma, but the fact that you're grieving. We don't want to normalize the trauma.
I'm just getting some clarity. We want to get the audience some clarity.
Exactly.
Right.
When you normalize the fact that something has happened, when you say something has happened and it's okay that you're not okay, that it is not you are not crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You have been through something,
Mm-hmm.
and you are not okay. When that can be normalized,
Mm-hmm.
then people can move to address what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And when there's a community of, or a support system of some kind
Mm-hmm.
that can hear that
Mm-hmm.
and make room for that,
Mm-hmm.
then you feel safe to do your work.
Mm-hmm.
If there are people, as you said early on, who are telling you, you're not over that, you're not over that,
Mm-hmm.
what's wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, girl, all you need to do is da-da-da-da-da.
Mm-hmm. Or dismiss it entirely.
Or dismiss it entirely.
And then walk away from you as if
Exactly.
you're a problem.
As
and
if
so
you're the
then
problem.
You're examining yourself saying, well,
What's
I wonder
wrong?
what is wrong with me.
Exactly.
And then so now you're
Exactly.
stuck. Because now
Exactly.
you've taken and internalized what their opinion of what you should have done or what you
Exactly.
should be ignoring. And then
Exactly.
it just seems to fester more.
It does.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But when that is normalized,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that you're not okay,
Mm-hmm.
you've gone through something.
Mm-hmm.
And grief and the impact of that actually creates a physical, biological reaction.
It makes you sick.
It makes you sick.
Mm-hmm.
You hear people talk about someone dying of a broken heart.
Mm-hmm.
That is real. That
Yes.
is real.
Mm-hmm.
That is
Mm-hmm.
real.
Mm-hmm.
That they are impacted in such a way
Mm-hmm.
that they don't have the capacity,
Mm-hmm.
or they haven't
That hurt
found
is still
it.
there, and
They
it seems to
haven't
be
found
digging
the way
at
to,
them.
right, they
Release
haven't
it.
found the
Mhm.
way to actually reach it
Mhm.
and work with it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't eat,
Mm-hmm.
sleep, and those are the normal things you do when you're grieving.
Right. Mm-hmm.
They don't eat, they don't sleep, and the biological reactions to this grief can in fact suppress
Mm-hmm.
and depress
Mm-hmm.
the will to live.
Mm-hmm.
The
Hence
young
the
man,
suicide portion to the
exactly,
services.
right.
You said the young man.
The young man I was going to marry, who
Mhm.
was killed in the accident,
Mm-hmm.
he had a younger brother
Mm-hmm.
who, after my fiance died,
Mhm.
this younger brother decided, well, I'm gonna do what he was planning to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so he actually, the young man I was going to marry was going to mortician school. He wanted to be a mortician.
Mhm.
He'd already started practicing. He had a grandfather who taught him how to do it.
Okay.
And so this younger brother decides he's going to step into his shoes and do what his big brother was planning to do.
Mm-hmm.
He got lost in that.
Mm-hmm.
He got married,
Mm-hmm.
and their marriage didn't work. They got a divorce, and it was almost as if he willed himself to die.
Mm-hmm.
He stopped eating, he stopped being socially engaged in the community. His parents were concerned about him, worried about him, would stop and try to, encourage him and
Mhm.
bring food, hoping he would eat it.
Mhm.
And it was a really difficult time, and he died.
Mm-hmm.
So we have parents who've lost a second child.
Mm-hmm.
So it is possible
Mm-hmm.
to physically react to grief.
I really believe that.
Yes.
And I've had that experience, so I
Yes.
know that it is real. So
It is
and
real.
hence the whole purpose of me bringing you on, because people, I'm not a professional. So,
Mhm.
I mean, just
Mhm.
from a layperson standpoint, I could say
Mhm.
that all day, or just, when you go to a funeral, you're like, I'm going to pray for y'all, and, I understand what you're going through,
Mhm.
and people look at you like, you couldn't, because I'm going, it's like, I'm going
Exactly.
through this. How could you understand me? You know what I'm
Exactly.
saying? But without
Exactly.
having to go into your own personal experience,
Right.
all you can say is, I'm gonna pray for you, and
Mhm.
hope they find the service that they need. But most time, and most often, I run across people that they're burying things. Or
Yes.
like, I'm one of those people, I like to communicate, so I want to talk about what's going on. And
Yeah.
sometimes I run into people who, oh, I don't want to talk about that.
Exactly.
And so
Exactly.
it's like, especially when you're in an interpersonal relationship, that could be kids, it could be parents, it could be cousins, whoever.
Whomever,
and
friends.
it could fester. And
Yeah.
then well, why are you so mad? No, I'm not angry. I just want to talk about it. Let's
Right.
get this out,
Right.
figure out what we need to do. Let's heal and let's move forward.
Mhm.
But then when you have a resistant party, it just seems like especially when both of you are family or friends or whatever,
Yeah.
you're stuck, but they threw it away out the window.
Right, right.
So, but I just found myself in a place where, okay, well, if that's the way they want to handle it, I want to force it, I'll just exit myself out of their life.
Right.
And I hate doing that, but it
Mhm.
seems like I had to start doing that as a protective measure. And so that's why I felt like this was important. It was a very important discussion and information to be had, because we just, as a community of people, need to stop doing it, because it's just creating more havoc than it is healing. You know?
Well, the thing that you did, as when you kind of stepped back,
Mhm.
and it almost sounds like that was a negative reaction. In fact, you do what you have to do to take care of yourself.
Mhm.
So you were where you were, whomever you were talking to is wherever they are.
Mhm.
You find the community that can hear you.
Mhm.
If they're not ready,
Mhm.
that's not good or bad.
Mhm.
That's where they are.
Mhm.
You find the community you need to find to be heard and supported, and get the support you need.
Mhm.
They'll work it out or not,
Mhm.
but you get the support you need.
Mhm.
You talk, honey, until you can't talk no more.
Mhm.
That's what you do.
Okay.
I remember when after I was in seminary, one of my good friends, she also graduated from seminary, and she was pastoring a church. Oh, different things were happening. And I remember we spent many an evening on my balcony. I had a cute little apartment.
Okay.
She lived in the same complex. Many an evening listening to her tell me the same story every time.
Because it's not over for
Because
her.
it's not over for her.
Because she
So-
hadn't had a chance to
Right,
get that resolved
To
with
work it out.
whoever she had that
right,
with, and they just were like, nah.
exactly.
And, but the other thing I found when I look back on my childhood and the
Yeah,
community we
yeah,
lived in,
yeah.
it was always, we're going to this house, stay in the house, and as
Yes.
we grow up
Yes.
as adults, we are stifled in our ability to be able to conflict resolve. And that's why I feel like that's dangerous to do. And then as adults, we grow up, so we have no, we're not taught where to place those emotions, how to deal with those.
Right.
And then so it's almost like you're, one day I asked my son, just to make an example out of it. I asked him, I said, do you think your development is arrested? He's like, huh? He said, Mom,
What are you talking about?
do you mean am I dumb? I'm like, no. You're in high school, so you're supposed to know what that word means, And so I went on to explain to him we were on our way, because the only time I could really kind of get a chance to talk to him, besides the, teenage time that they have with their friends, is to talk while we're on our way to school.
Exactly.
Because you ain't going nowhere. You in the car. So.
And you're not looking at it.
Right. And so I had to, can you take your earbud out for just a minute, and then you can go back to listening to your music. And I explained to him, I said, I want you to be a healthy young man. And I want you to grow to be a healthy adult. I said, so I know you probably have been around, where you visited people and there was, may have been chaos in the house and may not. But at some point you might have saw some dysfunction. And I want to clear up with you what that looks like and what you need to do for yourself, so you can, if you ever get married or have a relationship, you'll know how to interact in your relationship in a healthy manner, so that it does not become something where you all are burying things and you begin to hate each other because one doesn't want to deal with it and the other does, or neither one of you do. So however that is, it still needs to be dealt with, because it'll fester into sickness. And so my explanation to him was, You know, arrested development means that emotionally are you developing at the age that you are to the age that you're going to be appropriately. I said, if you don't understand that, then you look it up for yourself, and then you see where you are, and then help yourself. I said, because you know you can't do that. And he's like, oh, I thought you meant was I dumb? No. I want you to be emotionally mature. So when you get in the work field and you become an employee or you're an employer, you know how to operate in those different spaces, because they're sometimes hostile work environments that this happens in. You know, you get bosses that behave in a very negative way and cause people depression. You know, you have people who've lost jobs. So they haven't dealt with the ability to be able to deal with loss of work, and that's financial, which helps the family. So it made me go off into that arena with him, because, you know, kids coming along, their brains are not all developed yet. So as teens, they're still growing. And so that hence is why I wanted you to come on and talk about grief, because there's so many levels of it, as you just described. And sometimes we don't know that we're dealing with something, and that it ain't just going to a funeral and, okay, we're going to pray for the family, okay, let's get flowers, let's go see, we can bring a pot of soup. It's more to it, and it's in all realms and aspects of your life, and it could appear at different times. So I want you to engage a little more on that topic, if you will.
The one thing that is also true is people have to figure out who's safe. So,
and when you say who's safe, describe what that looks like.
People have to figure out who they can talk with.
Okay.
And that's not just about grief, it's about life. So figuring out who you can talk to about grief is usually pretty quick, because if they're not up to it, they walk away.
Or they'll say, I don't want to argue with you. They'll pose it as an argument, but it's really not an argument. It's something they just don't want to deal with. So they're still in the burying stage, basically, is what you're saying. Okay.
Well, or wherever they are. Wherever they are.
So that's not
but
a
they're
safe
not.
space.
It's not a safe space.
Okay.
That's the bottom line. That is not a safe person. It's not a safe space. So finding the safe space, and that also means that when I come and talk to you about something, it doesn't become part of what's going, talked about in the neighborhood. So it's also safety in that way. People you can trust with your grief, because not everyone
knows mature enough to be able to say, okay, that's between that person and I, so we just going to leave that there until they want to revisit it, or they never visit it. I got to be okay with that they don't want to visit it, and heal me. And be okay with that it's okay.
Find your space, and find the grace to let them do their work, however long it takes.
And that can don't get upset with them because they don't want to.
Okay. Because that's not who they are. That's not what they're about. That's not what they do. All of that is fair as well. If people grieve at their own pace, there's some people who someone dies and they get rid of their clothes and anything that reminds them of them immediately, and some people who never
something
do.
to sniff on, like, this reminds me of little Timmy or Mary or Susie or whoever.
And they'll set up some kind of shrine to them. Or one of the most famous examples is Queen Victoria, who was queen during the 1800s. I think that's right. And her husband died young, and she mourned for 50 years. Always wore black. She was known for that. And that was how she put up with it. That's how she dealt with grief. She was openly grieving. Would I do that? Clearly not. You didn't do that. But that was her way. So we can say whatever we want to say about Queen Victoria. She was queen, she ruled, she governed her country and a few other countries. She did what she had to do. And she grieved all those years. As did President Lincoln's wife.
So now,
Mary Todd Lincoln, she did the same thing.
where would we find your phone number, and how would we contact, and what's the name of the website that we could go to reach you or to reach out to your staff so that we could establish a connection if we want to reach out and get some help?
Well, I worked for Angela Hospice. I ended up working with hospice as a chaplain. I did that for over 20 years
Okay.
before I started doing the work that I'm doing now in grief and in education. And so I worked for Angela Hospice, that's in Livonia, so you could look up Angela Hospice,
Okay.
and you could look up under community.
You still got that too.
I mean, I'm still recording.
And I'm
Hi, we're still here. Hi. Okay, so for those of us who we're kind of get your pen real fast. Askforangela.com. AskForAngela.com. dsmith@angelahospice.us if you'd like to send out an email. Direct line 734-742-1130, or you can call 866-464-7810. Angela Hospice. Well, for all of you who already know me, you know I'm about healing. You know I'm about self-work. You know I'm about those who are around me. I'm going to get on your nerve, and 'cause I want you to heal too. But, you know, if you're not ready yet, Reverend says you don't have to be according to my time. But I would appreciate it if you do seek some help. Don't be alone. Don't sit with it. Good grief. Do something about it, okay? Reverend Smith, I love you. Thank you so much.
This has been fun.
I loved the platform that we all were on, and I learned a lot. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for being available. And also, the Reverend has a service that they do, voluntary work for any church that wants this package, this service. She can give you all the information that you need if you call one of those numbers, and you can connect with her if some of your parishioners or pastors or first ladies or whomever need this service, or your community organization. Call her up. It really is a wonderful service. It really is a sense of relief to have this available. I've never seen it before. It's great. Thank you. K-Man for Peace. Reverend,
It's been great.
thank you.
Thank you.
We love you. See you next time.
Bye-bye.